afternoon on this Monday, March 31st. I'm Yumna Naufal and these are today's headlines. Sulaiman shares a national dialogue session at Babda Palace with participants likely to skirt off the subject of national defense strategy, followed by the boycotts of Hezbollah. Electricité du Liban workers warn that Lebanon will plunge in darkness if the parliament endorses an urgent draft law proposed by the Change and Reform Bloc MP Ibrahim Khanaan. And Turkey's ruling party claims victory in local elections in the midst of damaging security leaks that have shaken Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government. President Michel Sulaiman is chairing a national dialogue session at the Babda Palace with participants likely to skirt the subject of a national defense strategy following a boycott by Hezbollah and other parties from both sides of the political fence. Sources close to the presidential palace say that participants will discuss the security situations in Lebanon and the recent Higher Defense Council decision to implement a security plan in the north and east of the country. Hezbollah's decision to boycott the inter-Lebanese dialogue comes after its Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah voiced over the weekend resentment at Sulaiman, who has repeatedly criticized the party over its military role in Syria. MP Jean Gossapian, the future parliamentary bloc member, stated that in today's meeting they discussed the proposal submitted by Sulaiman in the last session in September of 2012. The Electricité du Liban contract workers are warning that Lebanon will plunge in darkness if the parliament endorses an urgent draft law proposed by Change and Reform Bloc MP Ibrahim Khanaan. Considering its conspiracy, the contract workers closed the gates of the company's headquarters in Mar Mikhael, burning tires in its premises to protest the draft law, which they argue contradicts the agreement they had reached with the government of former Prime Minister Najib Mikati when they lifted their 95-day sit-in last year. Khanaan stated that he was one of the lawmakers who signed the draft law, denying that he was the one to propose it, and if the contract workers wanted to modify it, then they should propose their suggestions to Parliament. The contract workers blocked briefly the 2 lanes of the Karantina highway, causing a lot of traffic. But speaking on behalf of the part-timers, Lubnan Mahmoud described the bill, which he claimed was the work of Khanaan, as a massacre. He warned to cut power across Lebanon if Parliament approved the bill, as it is on Tuesday. The protesters also warned EDL that its headquarters would be closed down if their demands were ignored. Parliament is expected to meet for 3 consecutive days starting tomorrow to approve a number of draft laws, including that of EDL. In other local news, Telecom Minister Boutros Harib announced that the tariffs for landlines and mobile phones will be reduced starting April 1st. This is the first good news in order to better serve the people and their interests, he said, especially those with limited income. He stated this during a press conference that the reduction will range between 30% and 50% of the current prices. And he added that the cost of phones in Lebanon have become very high compared to global tariffs, which has forced some sites to resort to services that compete with the official telecom network. This has consequently harmed the sector and, as a result, the state treasury. Harib announced that the new tariffs can now be compared to those of regional and European countries. State Commissioner to the Military Court, Judge Sa'ar is issuing around 200 arrest and search and investigation warrants against suspects from the city of Tripoli and Ba'a and Beirut because he says they have breached security across Lebanon. They are being charged with various crimes, including involvement in gun battles, theft, stealing cars and bombing them, the possession of arms and explosives, forging official documents, murder and attempted murder. Just to remind you, Lebanon has witnessed car and suicide bombings, rocket attacks and gunfights between pro and anti-Assad fighters in several cities and towns across the country. And it has also seen a rise in the wave of kidnappings and abductors, usually for ransom. Syria's information minister is lashing out at Turkey, accusing Ankara of sending foreign fighters across the border to fight Syrian government troops in President Bashar al-Assad's ancestral homeland in Latakia province. Omran Zubi told State TV on Sunday that Turkey is facilitating the entry of groups of foreigners armed to their teeth into Latakia, where fighting is raging between Syrian forces and rebel fighters trying to oust Assad. Recently, the Syrian government complained to the UN that Ankara was providing cover to rebels crossing the border to Syrian soil. Now, Turkey is a NATO member that once had good ties with Syria, but the two countries had a falling out over Ankara's support for the Syrian opposition in the 3-year-old conflict. Hostilities have flared along the border on several occasions, and last week Turkey shot down a Syrian fighter jet saying it violated its airspace. Turkey's ruling party is claiming victory in the critical local elections that took place amid corruption allegations, damaging security leaks and online bans that have shaken Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government. Addressing his supporters late on Sunday after the results were revealed, Erdogan said he would enter the lair of his enemies and make them pay the price for plotting his downfall. The elections were widely seen as a vote of confidence for the rule of Erdogan, and his supporters celebrated the victory throughout the night. His Justice and Development Party got a 45.6% of the votes, as the main opposition Republican People scored 27.9%, compared to the Nationalist Movement Party, which held 15.2%, as 98% of the votes were counted by this time noon. The Supreme Presidential Election Commission announced that Egypt has set the dates of May 26th and 27th for its first presidential election following the ouster of former Islamist President Mohamed Morsi last July. The schedule set by SPEC for the upcoming presidential elections have voter registration starting this morning, although candidates will not be allowed to campaign before May 3rd. The results of the election's first phase will be announced by June 5th at the latest, while the runoffs will be held on June 16 and 17 if there is no winner. SPEC has stipulated that the final results of the polls must be released before June 26. Time is tight, but the election committee said that the candidates still have time to campaign. A decree issued earlier by interim President Adli Mansour that immunes the committee's decisions have raised concerns on the integrity of the process. However, SPEC has also publicized an open invitation for monitoring the elections. An Israeli court convicted former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert in a wide-ranging bribery case. The verdict could send him to prison and is likely to rule out any immediate hopes for a political comeback. The development steals the most serious legal battle the 68-year-old Olmert has been waging since he was forced to step down as Prime Minister in 2009 amid a flurry of corruption allegations. The Tel Aviv District Court handed down its decisions in a Jerusalem real estate scandal case related to Olmert's activities before he became Prime Minister in 2006. A total of 13 government officials, developers, and other business people were charged in 3 separate schemes related to the Holy Land housing development in Jerusalem. Legal experts say that such a conviction will almost certainly entail time in prison for Olmert. In world news, North and South Korea fire artillery shells into each other's waters, a flare-up of animosity between the rivals that forced residents of 5 frontline South Korean islands to evacuate to shelters nearby. South Korean Defense Ministry spokesman Kim Min-seok states that North Korea fired 500 rounds of artillery shells over more than 3 hours, about 100 of which fell south of the sea boundary. He added that South Korea responded by firing 300 into the North Korean waters. No shells from either side were fired at any land or military installations, but Kim called the North's artillery firing a provocation aimed at testing Seoul's security posture. There were no immediate comments from North Korea. Residents on frontline South Korean islands spent several hours in shelters during the firing, and officials temporarily halted ferry service linking the islands to the mainland. Ukraine's defense ministry says it has noticed a gradual withdrawal of Russian troops from its border that may be linked to Washington's latest push for a diplomatic solution to the worst East-West crisis since the Cold War. The Ukrainian Defense Ministry's General Staff spokesman, Oleksiy Dmytryk, said he could not confirm how many soldiers the drawdown involved or the number of troops still stationed at Russia's border with its former Soviet satellite. U.S. and EU officials estimated over the weekend that Russia's sudden military buildup along Ukraine's eastern frontier had reached 30,000 to 40,000 soldiers. Kyiv Center for Military and Political Studies analyst Dmytro Timshuk said on Monday that his sources had told him that Russia had only 10,000 soldiers remaining near the border. This wraps up today's bulletin. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Suleiman chairs a national dialogue session at the Babda Palace with participants likely to skirt the subject of a national defense strategy following the boycotts of Hezbollah. Electricité du Liban contract workers warn that Lebanon will plunge in darkness if the parliament endorses an urgent draft law proposed by Change and Reform Bloc MP Ibrahim Kanaan. And Turkey's ruling party claims victory in local elections in the midst of damaging security leaks that have shaken Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government. Your Monday headlines live on Future Television. Stay tuned for the news in French, and until next time, take care.
النشرة.